"Parasites need to be sanitized," Jonas remarked, pouring beer over me. "Good for you, all cleaned up," chuckled my mother-in-law, seeing me drenched. I reached my breaking point. "Are you ready for this, Jonas?" I asked. My father-in-law retorted sharply, "Don't get cocky when you can't do anything right." "Well then, I'll stop sending money home," I declared, noticing the tension in my in-laws' and Jonas's faces. "What do you mean?" "The money I send is my own," I pressed on, confusing Jonas. "I mean, I'm going to divorce you," I announced in front of everyone. I was planning to divorce him soon anyway. If that's the case, might as well get it over with now. But I won't just end it. I'll make sure to pay back double for the humiliation I've endured. I'm prepared for that. Besides, opportunities always come unexpectedly for me. Now is the time. If I get divorced here, everything will go smoothly. I swiftly went to the room next to the entrance to retrieve the bag containing the filled-out divorce papers. My name is Mirabelle Manson. Currently, I'm helping out at my family's tea business, not just on the side, but as a salaried employee. Being a housewife is also my responsibility. My husband, Jonas, works at a general wholesale trading company, mainly dealing with hotel amenities. Jonas often complains about his job. There's a reason for that. Jonas's family used to run a hotel which went bankrupt years ago. Even now in his mid-40s, Jonas might not have given up on his dream of running a hotel. On the other hand, my in-laws retired after the hotel's bankruptcy. I wonder where Jonas inherited his stubbornness from. He's not at an age to be dreaming anymore. I've started to think like that now that I'm 40. Apart from that, it's not easy because the in-laws have retired. They rely entirely on us. They're unemployed, with their only income being their pension, which they say isn't enough to live on. They ask Jonas for financial help. Of course, I'd be willing to help within reason, but the audacious in-laws are not satisfied with just that. They'd often come into our house uninvited, even eating food from the fridge without asking. There was even a time they ordered food without permission, expecting me to foot the bill. When I returned home, they simply said, "We told them you'd pay for it later. Hurry up and go." I know I can't cause trouble for the store, so I held back what I wanted to say. But when I returned home after paying, the in-laws had already left, leaving the room in a mess. Standing in front of the chaos, I was stunned. Meanwhile, Jonas came home. As soon as he entered the room, he exclaimed, "What's with this room?" I explained that my in-laws had come over and helped themselves to food and drinks. I expected Jonas to confront his parents, but he just sighed softly, turned his back to me, and said, "I'm going to take a shower. Clean this up." "Isn't there something else you should say?" I asked. Jonas turned back, sighed again, and continued, "Dealing with my parents is also part of a wife's job, right? But they're your parents. I'm tired from work. Don't compare me with a woman who just helps out at her family's business." With that, Jonas quickly left the room, leaving me standing there in shock. What's with that attitude? Like father, like son, I guess. Does he think of me as some kind of maid? In the end, I had no choice but to clean the room alone, grumbling about Jonas and his parents. Then I started thinking about how Jonas and I got married. The pushy in-laws were involved in the circumstances of our marriage. It all began when I was in my senior year of high school, tending the tea shop. A well-dressed woman in traditional attire appeared with a frown on her face. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. After looking around, the woman approached me. "Are you a part-time worker? I need to talk about the next delivery," she said. "No, I'm the daughter of the owner. My father is out on an errand," I replied. "I see. Well then, please pass on the message. We're going to stop doing business with your family," she declared with a snide smile. That was my first encounter with my mother-in-law, canceling the deal abruptly. "What do you mean?" "It's none of your business," I retorted, but my mother-in-law raised her voice. Just then my father returned home. "This is Mrs. Manson. What can I do for you?" he asked politely. Good timing. Actually, quickly grasping the situation, my father invited my mother-in-law inside and ordered me to serve some high-quality tea. "Is that rude customer really that important?" I grumbled. I prepared the tea. Later, I found out that my mother-in-law used to be one of our valued customers when her parents ran the hotel. Our local premium tea was served there, making it quite profitable for us. So you can imagine my father's panic when the deal was about to be canceled. After my mother-in-law left, my father talked to me. "Hey, Mirabelle, would you consider going on a date?" he asked. With the sunset to inherit a nearby resort. My mother-in-law had proposed terminating the contract, citing business cost-cutting. Losing the hotel contract would be a huge blow to our tea shop. She proposed an arranged date, finding a bride for Jonas the hare. If I married Jonas, they'd continue business with us. Of course, my father refused initially, but my mother-in-law remarked, "Our hotel has a more stable future than your small tea shop." At that time, the hotel was thriving. I knew it was prosperous, but my father understood it better. Concerned for my future, my father asked, "Is that okay, Mirabelle? Meeting him would be fine, right?" I was still in high school, and whether I'd marry Jonas was another matter. But arranged meetings through business connections were not uncommon. I wasn't a child anymore, and I knew that much. Despite disliking my mother-in-law's leverage with the contract, I accepted the arranged meeting. On the day of the meeting, Jonas arrived. He seemed nice. Unlike my mother-in-law, he had a gentle demeanor. Being involved in the accommodation business, he appeared mature to my teenage eyes. After high school, I married Jonas, but it turned out to be a mistake. Immediately after marriage, Jonas changed. "You're going to be the manager someday," he insisted, echoing his mother. "So, dear, do your job exactly as my mom says." But balancing everything Jonas and his mother demanded left me no time for myself. "Why you need money?" Jonas asked when I considered hiring help. "It's only natural for a daughter-in-law to help with family business." I endured, unable to discuss or get a break. One day, I overheard my in-laws talking. Returning to the office for a break, I hesitated outside the door. Inside, they discussed bankruptcy and loans. Before I could enter, my mother-in-law spotted me. "What's up, Mirabelle?" she asked sharply. Behind me, a middle school-aged girl appeared. "You shouldn't be here," my mother-in-law scolded the girl. Apologizing, I led the girl back to her room. "I'm sorry for startling you," I told her. "Let's head back to your room, Sarah." Sarah's father was searching for her. "I apologize for any trouble," I said to him. Sarah smiled when I offered her a piece of cake. Returning to work, I overheard more about the hotel's bankruptcy. "It's your fault." My in-laws blamed me. Even Jonas looked at me coldly. But it wasn't my fault. A man had offered to help after the bankruptcy was decided. I owed it to Sarah's father for taking care of his daughter. He was the president of a company that managed hotels and such. He decided to take over the management of the hotel to repay the debts my in-laws had accumulated. He rehired all the hotel's employees and even paid their overdue wages. However, he wouldn't rehire my in-laws because their negligence had caused the bankruptcy. Meanwhile, he helped find a new job for Jonas, all because I earnestly begged him. "I really appreciate it. With this, we might just make it." I thanked Sarah's father many times afterward. Jonas successfully found a new job. Although the in-laws became unemployed, they were of age to receive their pension. I thought we could manage if I worked at my family's business, but that turned out to be too optimistic. Initially, the in-laws lived quietly on their pension, but gradually they returned to their intrusive ways. Complaining to them was of no use. They wouldn't listen. In fact, they got even worse. I started preparing for a divorce gradually. Then there was the time they ordered delivery on my account. I couldn't stand it anymore and complained to the in-laws. My mother-in-law responded, "I'm sorry. I want to make amends. Come to our house with Jonas next Sunday." Before I knew it, more than 5 years had passed since the hotel's bankruptcy. I had been patient, but this was my last chance. Thinking that, I responded to my mother-in-law's call. The day after finishing my work, I headed to my in-laws' house. Upon arrival, there was a mountain of shoes at the entrance. I put my bag in a nearby room and headed to the living room. As soon as I entered, I was shocked. A large group of relatives was making a racket. "The reconciliation party has started. You're late, Mirabelle." Jonas, at the center of the commotion, called out to me. He was already drunk. "You're already drunk. How much did you drink?" Jonas and I had left the house together, and I had been working for about an hour. Jonas, on the other hand, should have come straight to his parents' house, so he had been drinking here for about an hour. How could he get this drunk in just an hour? As I was stunned by this, Jonas came closer to me. In the next moment, he pointed a glass at me. "We need to disinfect the parasites," he said, pouring beer over me. "Good for you, all cleaned up." My mother-in-law laughed as she saw me soaking wet. I had reached my breaking point. "Are you ready for this, Jonas?" I asked. My father-in-law retorted sharply, "Don't get cocky when you can't do anything right." "Well, then I'll stop sending money home," I said. In that instant, the expressions on my in-laws' and Jonas's faces stiffened. "What do you mean?" "The money I send is my own," I pressed on, confusing Jonas. "I mean I'm going to divorce you," I declared in front of the relatives. I was planning to divorce him soon anyway. If so, I might as well get divorced right here and now. But I don't intend to just get divorced and end it. I'll make sure to pay back double for the humiliation I've received. I'm prepared for that. Besides, opportunities always come unexpectedly for me. Now is the time. If I get divorced here, I feel like everything will go smoothly. I immediately went to the room next to the entrance to get the bag containing the filled-out divorce papers. I'm glad I brought it just in case, I thought. Thinking that, I returned to where Jonas was. "Hey, Mirabelle, what about the discussion? Is it over here?" I slammed the divorce papers in front of Jonas. At that moment, the noisy relatives fell silent. In the hushed atmosphere, I looked at my in-laws and Jonas, then calmly told them, "Sign it and bring it to my family home. Once I can confirm it, we'll start discussing alimony." "Hey, you're joking, right?" "A joke? There's no way," Jonas exclaimed. "I'm fed up with all of you," I said firmly. I looked back and forth between my in-laws and Jonas. Perhaps feeling overpowered by me, none of them said a word. I took a deep breath and then stood up gracefully. After looking over everyone who was causing a commotion, I finally announced, "Well then, please take care of the burden that caused the hotel to go bankrupt yourselves." With that, I left my in-laws' house amidst the murmuring relatives. On my way, I stopped at a convenience store to buy a towel, then went straight back to my parents' house. I explained the situation to my astonished father. After hearing my story, my father sighed deeply. "What a mess. Sorry, Dad." "You don't have to apologize. The circumstances are different now. Previously, my marriage was crucial for the continuation of our family business, but now my in-laws no longer run a hotel. Even if I get divorced, there's no worry about our business being affected. I should have said no from the beginning. I really put you through a lot." "No, what's important is that you'll continue to be on my side, right?" "Of course." "Good. Then I need a little help." I smiled, then shared a certain plan with my father. With his support secured, I waited for Jonas to bring the divorce papers. But no matter how long I waited, Jonas didn't show up. If that's the case, I'll arrange for a lawyer first, I thought to myself. With that in mind, I started looking for a lawyer specialized in divorce issues. Just after finding one and having a discussion, I returned home to find my father and Jonas arguing in front of the shop. That's why I brought the divorce papers, and I have something to discuss with Mirabel. My usually gentle father was speaking in a harsh tone, seemingly following the plan I had laid out. Grinning, I approached Jonas. I called out to him from behind, "So you finally brought the divorce papers?" I was getting tired of waiting, Mirabel. "Where have you been?" Jonas snapped. "It doesn't matter where I was. Do you have the divorce papers?" I asked, reaching out my hand. Jonas turned away and handed me a brown envelope. I quickly checked the contents. Inside were the signed divorce papers. "Just so you know, we'll handle the alimony through my lawyer," I said. I was about to continue when Jonas looked at me intently and reached out his hand. "What?" "Don't play dumb." "The bank card," handed over. "The bank card for my account, the one where my allowance is deposited. I don't have it, though." "Don't lie. Who else would use it?" Jonas's loud voice made passers-by turn their heads. Feeling embarrassed, I let Jonas into the house. We moved to the living room to continue our conversation. Here's what Jonas had to say. After I left the house, Jonas, in a drunken state, signed the divorce papers. But once he sobered up, he began to feel anxious. There was no infidelity or such faults on his part, but splashing beer on me as a bad joke wasn't a good move. He didn't think that a loan would lead to the breakdown of our marriage, but he was sure a lawyer would pursue it, and if it came to that, it would be somewhat disadvantageous for him. In addition, various other procedures would arise. The expenses would increase, and it would just be a hassle. So he was trying somehow to make me reconsider the divorce. That's when, while trying to come up with various schemes, he noticed at a store that the card he pulled from his wallet wasn't working. The card was a debit card, which directly withdraws from the account. Finding it strange, Jonas checked his account and realized it was empty. "This has never happened before. You must have stolen it," Jonas accused. "I don't know what you're talking about," I started to say when Jonas slammed the table. "If you're going to play these games, I won't pay a penny in alimony," he threatened. I grimaced instinctively. "Then how about I see you for theft, since we're getting divorced?" Jonas raised his voice even more. "Listen, I really don't have your cash card. I just did what I said I would," I explained, causing Jonas to frown. After thinking for a bit, he asked me again, "What are you talking about?" "The allowance. I told you I was going to stop it, remember?" I clarified. Jonas looked utterly confused. I couldn't help but think how clueless he was and spelled it out for him. "The allowance I mentioned includes you too." "What allowance for me?" Jonas asked back with a dumbfounded expression. The story goes back to right after the hotel went bankrupt. The in-laws became unemployed, and Jonas found a new job. However, the salary for Jonas, who was hired midway through his career, wasn't much. On top of that, we had to send money to the unemployed in-laws, so I started working at my family's tea shop. Of course, as a full-time employee, I added the money I received from Jonas as an allowance to the money I sent to my in-laws as their allowance. Afterward, what remained of Jonas's salary became our living expenses. However, this meant Jonas's allowance was inevitably short. "Then where does my salary go?" Jonas demanded. "It went to this month's living expenses. We broke up before I could transfer your allowance. I hadn't transferred the allowance. That's why Jonas's card wasn't working." "What about my allowance going forward? If you budget well, you should manage, right?" I suggested. "No way," Jonas crumbled. I smiled at him mischievously, holding up the divorce papers. "I've got the signed divorce papers now, so it's too late to back out." Okay, Jonas eventually left, shoulders slumped. After a while, I received numerous calls from my in-laws. I answered a few times, but both my mother-in-law and father-in-law kept repeating the same thing. Do you intend to repay kindness with ingratitude? What are you talking about? Have you forgotten how we helped your family's tea shop? Indeed, it might be said that my family's shop was saved from bankruptcy because the contract with the hotel continued. But that hotel went bankrupt a few years after I got married, so it was just that level of a contract. In short, it's uncertain whether my family's tea shop would have gone bankrupt without the hotel's contract. Moreover, they were likely planning to drive the tea shop to bankruptcy depending on my response. Now that they've brought this up, all I can say is that it puts me in a difficult position. Besides, I believe I've repaid that favor with my unpaid work, including the subsequent support. That's why I declared to my mother-in-law, anyway, we're divorced now, so no matter what you say, I won't be sending any more money. With those words as my last, she hung up the phone. Since then, there have been no more calls from my in-laws. This settles it. Now I just need to push Jonas a bit further, I thought, smirking as I awaited the right moment. Meanwhile, I proceeded with the divorce formalities. To avoid meeting Jonas directly, I had a lawyer handle the alimony discussions. Surprisingly, the process went smoothly, apparently because Jonas was quite downcast. But I wasn't about to forgive him just for this. How he managed to arrange the money seemed he borrowed from someone, but that was no longer my concern. As the day I had eagerly awaited arrived, I headed to Jonas's workplace, feeling jittery. While I was talking at the reception, Jonas came out. Seeing me, he raised his voice. "What are you doing here, Mirabelle? I've got some business to attend to. Are you still planning to cause me trouble?" Ignoring everyone around, Jonas continued to shout, "Having you here is just a nuisance. In such a big company, you're better suited to a poor, small tea shop." I just listened in silence as employees around us started to calm Jonas down. But then Jonas began saying this to everyone around. "This woman is my ex-wife, a bringer of bad luck. Because of her, my family's hotel went bankrupt. If she stays here, this company will go bankrupt too. She should be kicked out immediately." That's how shamelessly Jonas was spreading the word. As I wondered what to do, a loud voice echoed, "What's all this commotion about? My ex-wife came here to disrupt our business? I'll send her away right now." Jonas cowered. "Ex-wife." The manager turned his gaze towards me. "You're already here, Miss Evans." Evans is my maiden name. After divorcing Jonas, I had reverted to my maiden name. I was called here, but this treatment is a bit. I showed my displeasure immediately. Manager West's expression changed. He turned back to Jonas, beginning to scold him fiercely. "Hey, Manson, enough is enough. How dare you treat an important guest like this?" "But she's my ex-wife. She's an important client," Jonas stammered. The manager dragged him away somewhere. A few minutes later, Jonas returned with a pale face, and Manager West was also there. "You're a company executive. What's that all about?" It seemed Jonas had finally grasped the situation. Actually, I was there for a business discussion with Jonas's company. My company deals with antibacterial materials made using kakin, like towels among other things. We also sell sweets made with tea. I came for discussions related to these products. Jonas's company had shown interest in antibacterial towels to use as amenities in hotels they supply. "When did you start a company?" "Right after the hotel went bankrupt. When I started placing my homemade sweets in a shop after the hotel's bankruptcy, I began efforts to increase my family shop sales. One of these efforts was diversifying our products, including tea-related items. The first was my homemade sweets. Initially, it was more for promotion than as a product, but they became unexpectedly popular, and a woman suggested commercializing them. That led to starting the confectionery business, which became a hit as a souvenir. Then I ventured into further product development, utilizing the kakin found in tea. While similar products were already on the market, Having connections from my time working at the hotel gave me an edge. I thought there might be demand for these as amenities because it was successful. I officially established a corporation. This was our first business discussion. "Why didn't you tell me?" "There was no need to tell you. We're divorced. That is." "Well, good luck with your work," I said to Jonas and headed to the company's reception room with Manager West. Afterward, the business discussion with Manager West concluded successfully. I secured a satisfying contract. I crossed paths with Jonas a few times at the company, but he quickly averted his eyes, apparently feeling quite awkward. He quit his job a few months later. According to a colleague, he started working part-time at a construction site, a job that seemed quite tough, leaving him worn out every day. Hearing this made me feel a sense of relief. My revenge was complete. One day, I received a call from President Norman. "My daughter always causes you trouble, doesn't she?" "Not at all. Sarah is doing great running the business. In fact, it was Sarah Norman's daughter who had suggested commercializing my sweets after graduating high school. Sarah helped with her father's business and worked at a hotel. During that time, she visited me, saw the sweets, and felt a sense of nostalgia. I'll take charge as president. Let's commercialize it." Of course, I thought it was just casual child's talk at first, but Sarah wasn't a child anymore. Taking after President Norman, she made some moves on other fronts, and before I knew it, she had incorporated the business. That company is where I work now, selling sweets made with tea. So I thought President Norman was worried about Sarah and contacted me, but as we talked, I realized that wasn't the case. "A guy I know tried to sell me your company's products." "Oh, the sweets or the kakin materials?" "The kakin materials. He was suggesting we use them as amenities in hotels." I was completely confused. After all, Sarah had already pitched them to President Norman. Why would it happen like this? President Norman explained the situation to me when I asked. It turns out a man had bought the rights to the product from someone. However, the sellers were none other than my former in-laws. It was a part of a premeditated scam. After hearing about me from Jonas, they plotted this fraud. "Because it's my daughter's company, I immediately knew it was a scam," he said. "I see. It seems they've been caught, but depending on your response, they were willing to settle things quietly. It appeared that if I showed leniency towards my former in-laws, they would let it slide. There was no way I was going to do that." I replied with a smile. "Please turn them over to the police." After hearing my response, President Norman ended the call. Later on, my former in-laws were arrested for fraud. They claimed until the end that I was involved. Of course, the police inquired about it, but my response was as you would expect. It's true they are my former in-laws, but this act was out of spite against me. I had no involvement. Ultimately, it seems that this single statement made my former in-laws come to terms with the situation. They are now complying honestly with the investigation. They might end up with probation or some form of criminal penalty. Even so, I hope they reflect deeply on their actions. Meanwhile, I'm busy with my days. I never thought that products made with tea would become this popular. However, I have one goal now, to attend Sarah's wedding and make sweets for her. Jonas and I never had children, so I can't help but dote on Sarah as if she were my own. That aside, I haven't given up on remarrying. If the opportunity arises, I'd love to remarry, especially to someone who appreciates tea-based sweets. That goes without saying.